Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our third quarter webinar. My name is Nick Breul. I'm a senior program manager here at the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund. As always, we try and bring a different part of the National Law Enforcement Museum to you as we do these webinars. Today, I am in the DuPont Gallery, and the two pieces of artwork you can see over my shoulder were done by police officers. And this new exhibit at the National Police Museum is an exhibit of 50 pieces of artwork, all created by former or current law enforcement officers. So anyone who is coming to DC, the exhibit should be here for the next several months. And if you get an opportunity, you should come down and take a look at it. There's some really fantastic artwork here, and it's not all centered on law enforcement. I chose to sit in front of these two pieces for obvious reasons, but a lot of it is a very diverse type of art. There's some sculpture. Most of it is watercolor and paintings. Anyway, what we're going to do today is what we normally do. Keith Williams is here. He is the Chief of Enforcement and Justice Services Division of NHTSA. We're going to hear from him, and then once we're done hearing from Keith, I will go over and bring everybody up to date on our statistics and our trends. So if I can, I'd like to welcome Keith Williams.
Well, thank you, Nick. I appreciate that. And it's really a neat new gallery. I appreciate that art. Those two pieces are really nice. So thank you to everyone for joining the webinar today. We appreciate your interest in law enforcement and highway safety. Certainly hope you take some good information away from this today. I'm pinch hitting today for Rear Nelson, who manages the project and usually does this presentation with the National Law Enforcement Memorial Fund. And we certainly thank Nick and the NLEOMF for the hard work and the important work that they do. And we do important work together to promote and keep law enforcement officers safe as they do their job, specifically for us in the area of traffic enforcement. And it's a tough job. So we do appreciate that. You know, Nick always says, and everybody at the Memorial Fund always says, you know, their job is to keep names off the wall. And we certainly appreciate that critical work. And, you know, they're critical to NHTSA's mission. And, you know, in keeping law enforcement officers safe, we're better enabled to keep all road users safe. And that's the end game for us. And we really appreciate that. So, Nick, that's all I have today. I really appreciate the relationship with you. I know I don't get to interact with you all as much as I'd like to, but Rear does a nice job, and we appreciate all the work we do through this project. So, Nick, back to you. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Keith. I really appreciate that, and of course, we appreciate our relationship with NHTSA. And to echo what Keith was saying, and most of you have probably seen these before, so this is not new. But again, the whole point about looking at these statistics, examining what's going on, doing the work that I do, and then gleaning what we can is what is informing the steps we can take to prevent a lot of these preventable things and to reduce crashes. And unfortunately, as in the last webinar, the numbers continue to go up. And I'm going to take you through what we're looking at right now. I'm also going to cover a little bit of our trip to IACP. Normally, I talk about, you know, the Memorial Fund and who we are. You guys, I think, are all familiar with the Memorial, what it does, the museum, which I've talked about. And then, of course, I work for this component, which is the Officer Safety and Wellness Group. And in that is Safe Leo, which is suicide awareness for law enforcement. I'm one of their instructors. Then we have the Destination Zero program. Today, I'm going to play a video of one of our winners that I mentioned in our last webinar. They received their National Officer and Safety and Wellness Award for their program just this past month here in DC. And then, of course, NHTSA, who is sponsoring all the work that I do. So IACP was in Boston this year. This is kind of a cool patrol wagon that they had welcoming everyone there. This was a very good conference. We did a lot. We were very engaged on the floor. We met with several folks and we took the time to interview some people about some of their products, what they were doing in law enforcement. And this wasn't just traffic centric. We also have the ambassador program, and those are photographs of Matt Garcia interviewing. The lower one on the left is our CEO, Bill Alexander, as he talks about what's happening at IACP, and we're sharing with our audience what's going on. And then the other guy being interviewed is from a company called MedTech. And we always are looking at things that will save lives. This company had some really amazing mannequins and medical IFAKs and kits and things like that. And one of the things they had that was, I thought, very cool, and a lot of you may have seen them, but it was a full-scale canine mannequin that breathed, sighed, growled, moved for you to train officers on how to do first aid, CPR, and basic life-saving measures if your canine has been severely injured. But they also had a whole bunch of stuff for humans as well. I actually walked by one display that startled me of this mannequin that came straight out of a horror movie. I don't know. I think I had a nightmare about it that night. The Tesla truck, we saw that there were a couple of these on the floor. The new Tesla, I don't know what they're called. I can't remember what they're called, but they're these big sort of geometric shaped trucks that you see out there now. There are a couple of law enforcement agencies that are, I think, looking at those. And of course, you see on the right, the presidential limo was there. It's always sort of fascinating to see some of the tech that is there, to include drones, firearms. Axon is there with their body camera program. And then there's other agencies that we met that had new tools for conducting traffic lane closures with lit pathways. And I think we've shared some of those with you in the past, between Beacon for Life and the pucks compared to the flares and that kind of thing. There is also a company that has new anti-drone technology. So you can literally shoot a drone down with this big, I guess, electronic gun that interrupts its electronics or disrupts its signal. Anyway, all kinds of cool stuff. So let's get into where we are in 2024. This is our third quarter. We're already into the fourth quarter in October. So I'm going to bring us up to date. And if you've been watching the news, I had to add additional cases this very morning after a very bad crash in Colorado yesterday. So currently, for traffic-related fatalities, we have 42 in 2024 compared to 27 at the same time in 2023, which is a 56% increase. We're also higher in firearms, also in other causes. There have been, if you follow these things, some additional deaths related to 9/11 and exposure to the toxins down at the World Trade Center site. So NYPD and some of the other organizations that are down there have suffered continual losses from the fallout of, no pun intended, from that day in 2001. So that brings our totals up. We have 26 automobile crashes, 6 of which were single vehicle crashes. I always talk about these single vehicle crashes, and it's something that is largely preventable, and we need to do better, and I want to do better in analyzing those cases so we can really drill down and find out, as I've said before, what's happening behind the wheel. As of now, last night, we have 13 struck by fatalities. 2 Colorado officers were struck last night and pinned under a vehicle. And they were already on the scene of a crash, and they were struck by an impaired driver. The male officer, who has not been identified yet, succumbed to his injuries, and the female officer is in the hospital in critical condition. So, and as I said, that just came out this morning. And we've had 3 motorcycle crashes. So what I'll do is we'll bring us up to date on sort of the details on everything that's going on. I'll always break it down by agency type. This doesn't really make a difference. It's just kind of an interesting detail of the difference in different agencies. And there have been 16 municipal officers struck and killed, 12 sheriffs, 12 state. I'll correct that. There should be an equal sign there. One federal and one territorial officer have been killed in traffic-related incidents this year. So that should represent all 42. When we look at 2024 all the way through where we are now and automobile crashes, 4 involved a pursuit, 2 involved transporting an arrestee, and I think you've heard me talk about those 2 cases. One involved the transport vehicle rear-ending a vehicle on the highway, and the individual who was killed was ejected. And I think the arrestee was also injured. And then the other one was the sort of bizarre case of the deputy who drove off a boat ramp, and both he and the arrestee who was in the back drowned. And I think that has been attributed to simply the deputy was very new, wasn't familiar to this part of the country. He had come from, I think, New York, and wasn't that familiar with this new area where he was a deputy, and thought he was on the main road when he was in fact not, and on a rural road. 4 of the cases involved either people on an administrative run or coming and going, as we call it, meaning they had a take-home car and they were on their way home or on their way into work when they had their crash. 2 were parked on the shoulder. 8 were responding to calls for service. And as we've discussed, almost all of those are priority lights and sirens calls for service that they were responding to when they crashed. 2 were on traffic stops. 1 was on patrol when they had their crash. 1 was conducting an investigation on their way to do some investigative work. And then 2 were parked at a crash scene. And I would remind you that when we talk about struck-bys, for our purposes, struck-bys are individuals out of their cars hit by vehicles. We also connect and tabulate those crashes that are involved at crash scenes that are secondary crashes with vehicles parked either on a construction scene, at a crash scene, or when they're parked on the shoulder doing some kind of police work, or when they're on a traffic stop. But we don't count those vehicle crashes as struck-bys. We count the people as struck-bys. I've had this slide up before. I know that you've seen this. I just think it's a good quick comparison to show you in terms of vehicle crashes over 12 years where we've been. Last year, 2023, was a very good year, and now we're already above that by 4, and we still have some more months in the year to go, so we'll certainly break 2023's number and be higher this year. So the auto crash types, again, and at the end of the year, and I know this PowerPoint presentation, if you've watched it, it's probably a little stale in its design and things. And I'll for the fourth quarter, which will probably be happening at the end of January, I will be giving you a lot more detail. I'll be talking more about violations of slow down and move over. I'll be talking about how many of these cases involved impairment. I'll telling you how many of these cases involved officers not wearing their seatbelt. By January, I'll have all that data. And so some of this, in terms of the crash types, may actually change, and I may even dig down a little bit further to talk about what type of crash it was. But as you see, we had 5 that occurred at intersection, 1 that was a side swipe. We've had 5 head-on crashes, 6 that lost control. Those are your 6 single vehicle crashes. In each one of those cases, the vehicle left the roadway and impacted into a tree, an abutment, a pole, whatever it may be. 5 involved vehicles being rear-ended. 2 involved rear-ending vehicles themselves, so those officers were at fault in those. 1 into the river, and then there's 1 that involved fog, but I still haven't gotten the details of what type of crash it was. Was it a rear end or a head-on or I haven't gotten all the details on that. So that's just kind of a quick look at how the crashes are coming out. Struck by crashes, and this is really, we've talked about this for years now. Our good friends at respondersafety.com, the Emergency Responder Safety Institute, gathers details on all of this. And I don't know if you've seen it or not. We had the chief of Arlington, Texas Fire Department on a few webinars ago, and he talked about his program that refurbishes old fire trucks that they're no longer using and keeps the lights on them, and they use them as blocking vehicles at major crash scenes or at crash scenes, period. And there's a video out now. One of those blocking trucks was struck by a pickup truck the other night by a distracted driver, and it saved lives. And if you see the image here with this hook and ladder strung across the roadway, protecting everybody, nobody wants to, no fire department wants to lose their hook and ladder, since apparently it takes 5 years to get one replaced. That's not good for an agency to be without their truck. But it certainly saves lives, and certainly the TIM principles, which involve all of these high visibility markings, the strategy for lane closures, and the use of a heavy blocking vehicle to protect responders downstream, is a key component. And if more people applied Tim's principles, I think we would have fewer struck by crashes. Already, if you look at this, for the struck by crashes, one involved a tire deflation device. I would remind you that we had 4 killed last year deploying tire deflation devices. One was an attempt and arrest, and what happened in that, it was a chase. And as everyone was getting out of their cars, other vehicles involved in the chase came into the scene where everyone had stopped. And unfortunately, one police officer struck another officer as he was getting out of his car, and that ended up being fatal. 6 were on crash scenes. And again, this is the biggest thing, on crash scenes. And a lot of them are distracted drivers. Others are impaired drivers who are crashing into scenes that already have emergency vehicles with their lights on and should be plenty visible, but for whatever reason, people are just not seeing them and they're driving right into them. And I think distraction plays a huge role in that, obviously, as well as impairment. And then one person was out directing or diverting traffic and was struck. 5 were on traffic stops. So you've seen this chart before again, and I'm sorry again if these are sort of getting boring after a while. I'll update them and change them. But we had a peak of 2021 with 27 struck by crashes, which, as you know, really got us motivated to try and look at this. Not that we weren't before, but it definitely lit a fire under us, and we held a traffic safety summit to discuss this and to come up with recommendations. I've just given you some of the recommendations that need to be passed on and followed. But again, 2023 was a pretty good year. We had a dramatic drop, and I was hoping that that was not only indicative of a change of driving behavior of people in the United States, as we saw that really aberrant driving post-pandemic with people just flying at 100 miles an hour constantly, people driving recklessly with just no concern for anyone else or themselves. But as you know, now we're at 13 already this year. So we're going to surpass the low number of 2023, unfortunately. I mentioned responder safety. They take national numbers. And as of October 4th, this is the last report that I downloaded from them. 32 first responders and roadway workers have been struck and killed in the United States. Again, they have 17 LEOs. That's because they will count crossing guards, auxiliary and reserve officers. And for us, if they don't have full arrest powers, we do not count them formally as LEOs. They put them under that category. 8 towing and recovery. And again, towing and recovery, for the most part, bears the brunt of a lot of these. Very often in years past, they have been the highest numbers of traffic fatalities and struck by crashes as they're out there working a white line recovery and get struck. And very often without that protection that we should offer them through the traffic incident management program. And I've heard one of the requests that came from the towing and recovery group when we did the 2023 summit in Lincoln, Maryland, the towing and recovery request is please have the LEO stay on the scene until the car is towed or removed, until all the vehicles are towed and removed. And even if it's a police car blocking the lane, which isn't ideal, it does help to protect those guys. And then you see 3 EMS fire, 3 DOT, and 1 roadway service technician. So motorcycle crashes, now we're up above where we were for 2023. And 1 officer was killed on an escort that involved a crash at an intersection. I had this information up during the last webinar, but it bears repeating for anyone working with organizations that have motor officers and motor officers who routinely engage in escorts, whether it be, as you know, in DC, we are escorting VIPs with our motor cordon all the time, and we have huge groups of motors running ahead of those VIPs, cutting and pulling traffics across wide swaths of intersections, and sometimes they have to move quickly as you have officers at the end of that group racing ahead to catch the next intersections ahead of them. And so it can be very dangerous, and that's where we've seen a number of fatalities. 1 officer was hit head on by a vehicle that was passing another. And then we just had a state trooper who was struck, and I believe that was by a vehicle, the very typical circumstance of a car turning left and not seeing a motorcyclist and turning right in front of them. So being that we gather data for NHTSA, here is Region 6 again, which leads the way, unfortunately, in law enforcement traffic-related fatalities. There are now, I believe, 11 traffic-related fatalities in that region alone. And I know the state of Texas has 8 fatalities this year already, which is a high number even for a large state like Texas. I mentioned before, Region 4 is the next highest there. Region 4 has Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, South Carolina, and Florida. And Georgia, unfortunately, has also suffered 4 line of duty deaths this year. So those are 2 states that have suffered relatively high numbers of law enforcement traffic-related fatalities. So we talk about injuries, and back in 2023, I told you I was starting to sort of track stories that were reported in the media about crashes that involved injuries. And in doing so, I sort of improved my method this year and have some better strategies and some better prearranged searches that I then get in my Google feed, that kind of thing every day. So it's more than just officer.com and police one. And I have some broader searches now, but I'm already up to 257, I think was my number this morning, incidents that I've copied and pasted and recorded. And of those, I verified that 230 officers were reported as being injured in their traffic-related crash or struck by injury or motorcycle crash. So we've got 42 dead, but we've got at least 230 officers across this country who have been injured in traffic-related incidents, and some of them critically. I think there are a couple of cases that the officers are still in pretty bad shape, and we've discussed before how difficult that is. We have an officer here in Montgomery County who was struck deploying tire deflation devices. He is now back to work. He lost both his legs. He's a double amputee. He's back to work, but it's a long way back for him to, I think he's going to go back to patrol, and he will not be the first, but it's a remarkable story. And we certainly wish that sergeant well, but there was recently a news story here in the local DC market about he's back managing roll call. He's a sergeant, he's in uniform. And I think he's going to get on the road soon. So it's a tremendous story. But again, these injuries can take a terrible toll, and not a lot of people can make it back from those injuries. So as you know, we also track trends, and I've had this stolen police vehicle warning out there. It's still happening, and it's still leading to chases. We just had several traces be initiated in Florida, California, and in Michigan. You can see the states that are there and the circumstances involved. You know, forever we have these folks who are handcuffed behind their back, and we try and leave that little vent window in the back behind us open so they make sure they get some air. And some of these wily folks get those handcuffs up over their legs, dive through that window, and are behind the wheel of your police vehicle headed on down the road. And the reason I focus on this is because it leads to chases 100% of the time. And very often these chases end up badly, not only for the suspect, but for other civilians who are not involved. And if we can eliminate this necessity to have to chase these vehicles that have weapons in them, that have police equipment in them, that have a police radio, lights and sirens, and can cause a whole lot of havoc, I think we need to take steps to do that. I recently was talking with some folks at IACP as I went around and talked to vendors, and many of them mentioned that vehicles used to have, and some still do, a switch that officers can hit in the car, that only the officers or trained officers would know where that switch was. And that is simply an on-off switch for the steering wheel, I think, or not the ignition, because you want to keep your car running. Otherwise, your lights turn off and your battery goes dead. But a number of these stolen vehicles have occurred as suspects are being chased, and they circle right around and jump into the police officer's car and take off. So again, I think if you're working with your liaison folks in your areas, they need to be aware of this, because it's leading to tragedy, and it's leading to damaged police vehicles. And in some of the cases, if you follow these online, there are a couple of horrific crashes that are involved in these stolen police vehicles. So also what we noticed, and that have caused a number of injuries in those cases that I tracked, are heavy vehicles being stolen and used against the police. The image here is from 1995. I don't know if anybody remembers this. It made the national news when a man down in San Diego stole a tank. And, how do you stop that? What do you do? And certainly you can't put your patrol car in front of it because you'll just get flattened. And, it's one guy driving a tank, so I guess you don't have to worry about the cannon on top, but certainly the weight of that vehicle and its ability to pretty much go through almost anything makes it very, very dangerous. So we've seen tractor trailers being stolen this year. This is just this year. Construction equipment was taken and used against officers to batter out of a situation. Someone grabbed some farm equipment and drove it at officers who were trying to arrest someone in a rural setting. You heard about the bus maybe in Los Angeles that was taken over. They've stolen fire trucks. Ambulances have been stolen. We had an ambulance, not this year, but previously, DC had an ambulance that was stolen. And then again, there was a military truck also in California stolen that eventually became bogged down in the sand. But these are heavy vehicles that can cause a lot of damage and can be a real conundrum for police on figuring out how are we going to stop this thing? Not only how are we going to bring this person into custody, but how do we disable it? Stop sticks may work on some of these vehicles, but they are very heavy and can keep going for quite a while. Certainly a lot of caution has to be taken when dealing with this heavier vehicle. So this is something that I saw more and more as I was going through cases this year. So our core topics, again, they remain the same, except I want to add one. And this is one that I'm also seeing more and more of, and they're very negative reports coming out. Now, I know that this has always existed in law enforcement. I was a cop for 26 years, and I knew lots of guys who had problems with alcohol, and some guys who were showing up to work in the bag. And back in the day, sometimes that seemed to be, I won't say tolerated, but people would turn a blind eye to it. But I've seen more and more cases, and I've downloaded and copied more and more cases of officers off duty, being very impaired and causing terrible crashes. And we've had at least 2 cases of on duty, in uniform, in marked patrol cars, officers drunk behind the wheel, being stopped by other jurisdictions and arrested. If that's going on to the point where we catch that one thing going on, we know the problem's much larger. And alcohol and alcohol consumption in law enforcement is another dirty little secret that is rearing its head. I think, it's always been there, as I said, but it's something that agencies need to start looking at. I mentioned the Safe Leo program, and under Safe Leo, alcohol use is one of the things we talk about, alcohol abuse specifically, and anyone exhibiting signs of alcohol abuse. Even though I think it has gone down among law enforcement over the years, it's still a problem. And it's one that I think police agencies have to really tackle and make sure we don't ignore and give a wink to it and that kind of thing. It's not only gives us a terrible reputation, of course, but it's dangerous. And if you go and look through the news reports lately, you'll find cases of officers who've been impaired behind the wheel on and off duty. Seatbelts, you guys know the story behind that. Still, 50% of officers involved in fatal crashes are not wearing their seatbelt. Fatigue is something else agencies need to look at. We are just going through this election cycle. I know here in DC, folks were working 12-hour shifts with no days off. People driving cars under those conditions are prone to make mistakes, right? They're not sharp. And they say fatigue can be just as debilitating as being impaired. Slowed reaction time, the whole 9 yards. So all of that is something that needs to be paid attention to. We've covered tire deflation devices, right side approaches. You've already seen how those save lives. Body armor, we've talked about that. And of course, being seen, being visible out there, that includes your vehicles. Some of the vehicle crashes I've seen are vehicles that have no markings on them whatsoever. Again, I know that a lot of commanders like to have unmarked vehicles that have lights and sirens in them and that kind of thing. But if you're out on the road making stops, your vehicle you should look like the Metropolitan Police of London. You just can't miss their cars, and there's a reason behind it: safety. So here's a video. This is the Independence, Ohio video. And hopefully this will play for you guys. This is their winning video. And it's not just traffic safety. It is what they did for wellness and a lot of the initiatives that they won for. But there's a core element of traffic safety that they talk about.
The city of Independence, Ohio is located just outside of Cleveland. The Independence Police Department has 38 sworn officers and a total staff of 48. The agency serves about 7,600 residents, and the population more than doubles during the day due to business commuters. In 2021, when Robert Butler became chief of the department, he had a vision for his new agency.
I have been in law enforcement for over 16 years. When I started, nobody wanted to talk about officer wellness, officer safety. It was very taboo. And I've always wanted to, when I became chief, introduce officer wellness. Make sure we do the best that we can for the officers that serve every single day. I wanted to be the change.
To do that, Chief Butler worked with his staff to create a comprehensive wellness program geared toward assisting officers and their families at work and home.
The elements of our wellness program are physical wellness, emotional wellness, financial wellness, as well as comprehensive safety and traffic safety.
The traffic safety for our overall officer wellness program, they go hand in hand. They are both connected. By focusing on our officer wellness, it benefits our traffic safety because it makes sure our officers are in the best possible position to do their jobs.
To protect its officers and the community, the Independence PD has taken a proactive approach to fostering safe driving practices, beginning with instituting a mandatory seatbelt policy and investing in top-of-the-line technologies for all of its cruisers, including overhead lighting and LED backlighting.
The LED backlighting is a big hit. From a traffic safety standpoint, it's really visible from a distance. It really encourages motorists to move over and increases officer safety while on that roadway.
The agency also purchased reflective vests and specially designed high-visibility coats.
Our coats are very unique. We have a 5-in-1 jacket where if you didn't put your traffic safety vest on because it's daytime, you can actually turn your coat inside out and it turns into a reflective vest.
To decrease officers' time on crash scenes, the agency invested in a variety of technologies to keep its officers safer, beginning with drones.
If we have a major accident or an accident scene with a large debris field, we're able to put up a drone, get real-time visual of the scene, and more accurately deploy resources. They've also been used on several large incident scenes where we were able to use the thermal imaging capabilities of the drone to search for injured persons and render aid in a quicker fashion than we would be if we were searching traditionally.
The IPD also purchased portable generators to keep traffic flowing at crash scenes or during a power outage. Nearly every major intersection in the city is compatible with the portable generators. Officers can simply plug them in and run the traffic signals until power is restored.
By being able to hook these generators up outside of the roadway, we're able to keep the lights functioning and keep the public moving, which reduces accidents, and maybe the biggest factor is that officers are not placed in the roadway.
To keep officers and the community safe, the agency developed a speed activation policy. Anytime a patrol vehicle exceeds 100 miles per hour, the in-car dash cam is triggered.
That camera then records that incident, and supervisors are able to then review that dash cam to ensure policy compliance and look for training aids.
All officers undergo intensive and continuous classroom and in-car training. The department partners with a professional driving company for emergency vehicle training and has Precision Immobilization Technique, or PIT, certified officers on staff. IPD officers are also equipped with stop-stick devices to disable fleeing vehicles safely and reducing the chances of a dangerous pursuit.
Every second that these high-speed pursuits continue, the probability for something harmful to occur exponentially increases. And thus being able to terminate that pursuit quickly and effectively as possible, it's not only safer for the offender, for the motoring public, but for the officer as well.
Since implementing their traffic safety program in conjunction with their overall comprehensive wellness program, the Independence Police Department has seen great success. They had 0 officer-related incidents in 2023, and so far in 2024 as well.
Morale is at an all-time high, officers' productivity is through the roof, and it really just seems that the general culture has really gone nothing but up. And I attribute that to our wellness program.
To win a Destination to Zero award is really a highlight of my career and highlights our department and our focus on officer wellness. This is the first step to a long pathway to make sure we continue to focus on officer wellness. I'm going to make sure that our department gets the best so that our officers can be the best.
But I met the Chief Butler and some of his officers when they were here for the award ceremony. And